All right. Um, this podcast is probably going to be worse than the bad ones have been, but we're just going to go. It's tradition because it's the week. It's OU Texas week, and we got to talk. And it's Tuesday. Tomorrow's Wednesday, and I can't believe it. Um, this is hour 17 of my day. I just got back from a swim meet. If I sound horrible, it's because I have allergies or I've been yelling at children all day. My daughter has diarrhea and my wife is doing the hardest part of her job. So, if not now, when, right? So, if this is choppy or rough or I have to stop or it's poorly edited, that is why. But I am not an Oklahoma fan if we don't talk about this week. Like, I'm not a college football fan if we don't talk about this week. This is like the week of weeks. Excuse me. Again, forgive me if things are. And it's my birthday. So, we're just going to do all of it and we're going to do it the best we can because doing something is better than not doing anything. And so we'll just start with last week. Again, was one of those weeks we said on the podcast. It looked like it was going to be meh. And for the most part, like the day, I can't even say that. I was gonna say the day was meh, but it wasn't. Because the Georgia game gave us something for sure, and that was the 2:30 Central Standard Time game. So we got everything we needed. The night games were absolutely phenomenal. And so it was another great day of college football. Let's go through everything. Number one, let's start with top 10. Um, and I'll start with 10. I mean, Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's at 10. They haven't changed. Um, they barely eked it out against Duke. Duke's a good team. I think everything we've seen out of Duke, they look like they're legitimate contenders for the ACC crown. Um, and I think it's one of the things that Bill Parcells line, you are what your record says you are. I think they're a one-loss team. Um, they should have handed Ohio State a loss. They didn't, but they probably should have lost to Duke. And I think you average those things out. And I think they're one of the top 10 teams in the country. Um, and one thing we will talk about later in this podcast is like, what separates kind of that mid-tier good, which the SEC seems like they're unable to figure out. Like you've got the elite, then you've got that like fat middle, and then the really, really bad. The SEC doesn't even know who's in what tier right now except Georgia. And they're all confused. But one of the ways that you can separate those two, the top from the mid tier, in my book, is beating bad teams soundly. Um, which Georgia is, I don't know if they're struggling to do or not. We'll talk about that in a second. And Notre Dame has done that, and they're having close games against good teams. Like both Duke and Ohio State, those are great. Those are good teams. They're great teams, but good, right? So I'm not going to penalize them. Some of the other teams on the list that are just outside, including Oklahoma, I just need to see like a little more. Washington State, I just need to see a little more. They've got a lot of good. USC, I need to see a little more. God, I hate that school. Excuse me. So Notre Dame is 10. Um, I said Washington State. I'm a moron again. Uh, but I have them at 9. I have Washington State at 9. I think their win last week against Oregon State. I'm sorry, against Utah was a really big win, and that was one of the first teams. I think I had Alabama in the top 10 when we started. Um, And I think Utah was a team that I said once they get Cam Rising back, they're going to dominate. And I still think that to an extent because their offense was the problem um, last week. Um, they've beaten good teams. They're undefeated, and I really like what they're doing. Um, they've got good quarterback play. We talked about it last week. So, of all the teams that are on the outside looking in, they are up in there. And then, so we go 8, Oregon, they stay the same. 7, Penn State. Same. And they had a rough, I mean, Northwestern. And that's what we're talking about, right? Like that Northwestern game was much closer in the first half than it should have been. Like much closer. And then what does Penn State do? They run away with it in the second, show that they're one of these elite teams. Six, Washington. Five, Texas. Four, Florida State, who was off last week. Three, Ohio State. And here's the switch. Georgia 2, Michigan 1. Um, I think the Georgia game against Auburn, I've seen enough of Georgia to be like, what are you doing? Like that Auburn team is one dimensional and they're not a good team. They're they're a fine football team. They can compete with anyone, but that doesn't mean they're gonna win. And the difference is with Michigan, they played Nebraska and just went 45-7, like a nothing burger. And so I just and you look at the scores, Michigan hasn't played anybody, but they've been Michigan, which again is an identity that has helped them beat Ohio State the past 2 years. And I like that a lot. Like it's classic Big Ten style of play, conservative play calling, I formation, run the ball, set up play action, um, keep the defense off the field. Like it just makes me. All we need is crisp fall air, and I'm in heaven. Okay, if you look at Michigan's schedule, you've got UNLV or Michigan 35, UNLV 7, Bowling Green, Michigan 31, Bowling Green 6, Rutgers, which Rutgers is not a bad team. Michigan 31, Rutgers 7. See the pattern here? 7, 6, 7. Michigan, Nebraska, 7. This is a good team. This is a really good team. And Harbaugh is back. And I think there's now this confidence that they have with the Michigan games behind them where they're now dangerous. And they probably shouldn't have lost to TCU last year. But TCU got hot. It's one of those teams where everything clicked for them, and it's what it is. But Michigan's the new number one. Georgia has everything you want in a top team, and they're just playing. They're being kids, right? Like this is why I love the sport more so than the NFL. It's because you look at this situation and you know exactly what these kids are thinking. He's like, we don't have to play hard. Yeah, I probably went and partied last night, like playing Auburn. Like, this is fine. We'll figure it out. If we need to play hard in the fourth, we'll play hard in the fourth. I mean, it's going to bite him in the butt, or at the very least, it needs to be reflected in the standings. So Michigan is now one, Georgia's down to two, Ohio State is three, Florida State is four. Um, that would make I don't know if it's too early. It's probably too early to talk about playoffs, but I would not mind seeing Michigan versus Florida State and Georgia versus Ohio State in a playoff because that's what it would be. That sweet. Texas is on the outside looking in, and same with Washington. So those the six. So I think for the most part, um, I'm going to be biased for my own poll, but I think that's pretty good. All right, out of the top 10, let's look back at the games of the week last week. Um, we will start with the nightcap, which I only saw highlights of because Notre Dame and Duke was on at the place that I was at. Um, a little Oktoberfest gathering. And so I had to catch up on that, and that seemed like quite an interesting game, and that was a really good game. Ended 24-21. West Virginia's defense looks good. TCU looks like they are struggling to do have the high octane offense that they had last year. I mean, that was a night game in Fort Worth, primetime television, and the crowd didn't seem too hot. It was a full house. I mean, I'm sorry, it was a packed house, but not a full house. And I understand that too. It's like, oh, West Virginia is coming to town. But West Virginia's defense looked really, really good. And I think that's the other thing where I'm like, oh, TCU's offense didn't look great. Well, TCU's defense has been really, really good. And they had two blocked field goals that made the difference and got them the win. And they were playing from behind most of the game. So that was a really good nightcap. Um, I don't know if it was better than Notre Dame Duke, but again, as I've talked about previously, I don't want to like highlight or showcase the same teams like over and over and over and over again. And I do love watching that Notre Dame team. Um, and then game day's there, so it's like if it's there if you want. But if you caught this West Virginia game at TCU, um, both those teams had the same record. I thought it was a good game from what I saw in the highlights. Our most interesting game of the week, Florida at Kentucky, was again this who is a mid-tier team in the SEC and who is not. Florida is not, and Florida is trash, and we all got teased by that win with Tennessee. Um, Florida didn't look good against Utah. Florida struggled against Charlotte, who SMU demolished this past week. Excuse me. So they go into Kentucky. Um, it's Here's some kind of stats that are wild. Where Billy Napier is if he sees the end of this season, that means he dominated the rest of the year because he's on a path to probably be shown the door. Um, which is insane, but it's what happens when you go to Florida, and Florida hasn't figured it out at all when their coaching search. But um, Florida suffered its seventh road loss under Coach Billy Napier since he took control of the program fewer than 2 years ago. Which think about that. That's insane. I mean, it's rough. Seven road losses in less than 2 years. So this season and last. Kentucky's running back Ray Davis accounted for 280 of the Wildcats' rushing yards, forced eight missed tackles over Kentucky's first offensive series on his own. Um, Here's a great stat: 189 of his rushing yards were gained after contact. That's insane. Um, Kentucky totaled 398 yards against the SEC's top overall and scoring defense. I didn't know that about Florida. And so it's just like you go on the road and you get out of the swamp, and like they did that with Utah, nothing burger, and they do that against Kentucky, nothing burger, and then when they play at home, they beat Tennessee, and that's it. And they barely beat I don't say barely beat Charlotte, but only beat them by two scores. Um, the Wildcats beat, I should say Kentucky. It feels weird saying the Wildcats. They beat the Gators for the third consecutive time, and it's their first streak since winning four in a row from 1948 to 1951. So they're in seriously unprecedented territory, or in a place that they have not been for a while. So, and that's what happens when I think Mark Stoops. Probably, I mean, he's not a great coach, but he's a really good coach. And it kind of juxtaposes itself with the situation in Florida. And so I think Florida's in big trouble, and Napier's gotta probably win out if he's going to keep his job, even 2 years. That might be extreme, but again, um, like, you're at Florida. You're the guy who did some amazing things with Louisiana, raising Cajuns. I don't know. It's one of those things that is kind of like mind blowing. I think it's like the Scott Frost situation, um, where he's at UCF and they are amazing, and then he leaves and they don't drop off, but whatever he takes over does. Um, it's just strange. You would think with more resources you'd be fine, but that's not always the case. All right, I was pulling out Florida's schedule here. They get Vanderbilt, which is gotta be the best medicine in the SEC. Like you just got rocked. Who do you get for conference play? You get Vanderbilt. Then they go against South Carolina, who I think again, you- I don't have a high opinion of South Carolina, so that should be good for them. And then it's Georgia, Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, and Florida State. Dude, he is screwed. He is screwed. They beat South, they'll beat Vandy, and they'll beat South Carolina. And I think that game's in South Carolina though. Oh yeah, it is. And that's the CBS game. That's the 2:30 game. So they get a nice sweet cupcake with Vandy. They're gonna go to South Carolina with Spencer Rattler. Has got a serious target. I'm totally blanking on his name. Um, and he's just been kicking butt. I think he's the top wide receiver in the country. This is where I'm like ignorance, but for the four people who listen to me, thank you so much. Um, I'm gonna look up your answer right now. Oh, Xavier Leggett. That guy is a freaking beast. And so that connection's gonna be there, and it seems like Florida's got the defense to stop it. But they couldn't stop shit with Kentucky, so who knows what's gonna happen there. So that's on the road, and I think that's gonna be hard. UNC struggled there a little bit. Um, then it's Georgia, Arkansas, LSU, Missouri, and Florida State. So one loss, two loss, three loss. That's at least three losses. They're sitting fourth in the SEC, and it's just like, yeah, I think that's game set and match. I'll get like some crappy bowl game. So anyway, that was interesting. Like I think in terms of like what could happen here, I think on paper that game could have gone either way. Um, and when we're trying to figure out who's kind of in that second tier in the SEC, Florida had a shot after beating Tennessee just a week ago. And now, how quickly it turns. It's just amazing how quickly things turn. Where, oh my God, you beat Tennessee and this is amazing. And, Tennessee had beaten Alabama last year and they were number 11 in the country and coming into Gainesville. And now, just 1 week later, it's what's going on with this program. The quote from Sports Illustrated, where I took some of the stats, is issues that plagued Florida in its Week 1 loss to Utah and continued to hurt the Gators in their wins. Continued to hurt the Gators in their wins against McNeese State, Tennessee, and Charlotte. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, how's McNeese State hurting y'all? Right? That's not a question you want to be answering as a coach. So anyway, I think Florida is in big, 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 big trouble. And maybe that's not an overreaction. It's like maybe that's an overreaction. It's not. The crazy bonkers, like what is going on in the SEC game was LSU at Ole Miss, and the way that Alabama took care of Ole Miss, I didn't think this was going to be like barn burner. Excuse me. I didn't. There was a question of whether or not like Ole Miss's offense was going to be able to do anything. But again, I think that shows that Bama's defense is coming back, and they're going to be forced to be messed with as the SEC play continues on. Um, the same cannot be said. Well, I say that. Oh, I'm sorry, I was talking about Alabama. Um, Same cannot be said for LSU. Um, Ole Miss gained 706 yards total offense against LSU. 389 passing yards, 322 on the ground. That's insane. And no turnovers. And these numbers are just for both sides. Jackson Dart, 26 of 39, four touchdowns. Jaden Daniels, 27 of 36, 414 yards, four touchdowns. Logan Diggs of LSU rushing, 19 carries, 101 yards. Quinshawn Judkins of Ole Miss, man, butcher that. 33 carries, 177 yards, averaged 5.4 yards carry. It's just insane. Like that game was like out of freaking NCAA football video game. And again, it's just like, okay, LSU, number 13 in the country, with two losses, And they've now, I'm sorry, two losses including the Ole Miss game, so they're 3-1. They're still ranked in the top 25. It's like nuts. But yeah, if this were a Big 12 score, I know the SEC homies would be like, "Oh, that's a Big 12 defense." And it's like, bro. Anyway, I'm not bitter. Anyway, that was a great game. That was our backyard brawl last week, and then finally, this is going to be a wonderful segue. UT played Kansas, their nemesis, their party ruiner for the past few years. Um, Basically, the team that got Charlie Strong fired. Texas took care of business. And this was our bet. That was a 17-point spread. I thought the Jayhawks would cover. In my defense, Kansas's best player was supposed to be in their quarterback, Jalen Daniels. And we talked about that in the podcast last week about how Kansas plays a game where, like, they know they need all 12 players. Sorry. They need all 11 players moving the ball. You can't just have the quarterback sit back there. He's got to be active. And he was out. And so that's going to screw you. Even with Daniels out and Jason Bean in, that game was 13-7 at half. And then Texas came out and it was 27-7 in the second half. And that's it. I mean, that's all I have to say on that game, and except for the fact that like Ewers looked really good. 25 of 35. He didn't like have to do much. 325 yards and one touchdown. He had one interception. Um, Jonathan Brooks ran for 218 yards and two touchdowns. Um, all the running backs averaged more than 4.5 yards a carry. Um, Texas looked really good. Like, besides watching my bet go up in smoke, this is the best Texas team. I mean, this team is better than the one that won the Big 12. What year was that? 2019. Am I right on that with Ellinger? Um, they're really good, and I think the thing that stands out to me the most is there's not like I think Ewers could be the guy that you say that, like they rely on the most. Um, but even if he goes down, I feel like the supporting cast is so solid. Like they're so good from tackle to tackle on the offensive line, from one to two wide receiver to the depth at running back. If he goes out, I think they don't miss a beat. I mean, like he puts them over to the top into the ability to destroy anyone they want to destroy. But I think even with him out, they can compete and be in every game because their talent on the offensive side of the ball is that good. And what compounds that is the fact that their defense is even better. And I don't think I have any stats in front of me. Um, I do. I do have some stats, and I'll go through it when we talk about the game of the week. But before we pivot to and my love of Oklahoma, I do need to. I mean, we started talking about this with why I brought down Georgia in the rankings because they just let bad teams hang around, or they let mid teams that they should be shoving around stay around to the third or fourth quarter. But when you go in at half and you're up by 6 points, and then you come out and you just take control of the ball, you run it, you dink and dunk, you make like intelligent play calls. I think Sark was like, it just everything looked good. The play calling looked good. The players knew like where to be, what to do. Like everything looked from top to bottom just tight against a good Jayhawks team. Like even I know that like Jalen Daniels is out. That does change the dynamic. Excuse me, but like this is what you're supposed to do if you're that much better. And when they came out in the second half, it was. I mean, that was not the game. And they've looked really good. And then we forget. No, I don't think anyone's forgetting about them. the Alabama game. But you go on the road to Tuscaloosa and you just do what they did against Bama. Man, this is going to be a week. And that brings us to the best game of the week, backyard brawl of the week, the most intriguing game, and the best bet. We do have a nightcap. I'll end with that because I don't want to just I mean, I will talk ad nauseum about the Texas Oklahoma game. I can't believe I just called it that. I'm sorry. Oh, I can't believe I just called it that. I'm really trying to play to the audience, the three people who may be listening. It really, from here on out, it's OU Texas, but I know that they're cringing every time I say that, so I just wanted to give them one time. Even then, I feel dirty. This is so exciting. It is so good to be going back to what this game felt like from 2000. I'd probably say 2012, which is if you win this game, you're in the national title hunt. If you win this game, you're in the driver's seat for the Big 12. If you win this game, you're in control of your destiny. And if you win this game, you get bragging rights. And we haven't had that for it feels like a decade. It hasn't been a decade, but like for example, and I want to make sure this is I don't think I have all of it in front of me. I tried to get it and I didn't do a great job. It's been a rough week, but this is the first time since 2011 that both teams are coming in undefeated. This is the first time since 2019 both teams are coming in ranked. And that is also coming in with the idea that you can be ranked like 19th and 19th in the top 10. That doesn't feel like anything special. This is the first time since 2008 both teams are coming in 5-0, so no one's had a bye week. And that was the 2008 game, the last time both teams were 5-0. I was at that game. That was the best Oklahoma Texas game I have been around for. I would love to say that the game where Oklahoma was down 28-7 and we benched Spencer Rattler. I'm saying we, and then brought in Caleb Williams on 4th and 1 or on that drive, and then on 4th and 1 I think it was that play. Um, he ran it into the end zone, and we started our comeback. That was my favorite game as a Sooner fan, but the best game because we lost this game, and OU would go on to the national title game in 2008. This was our only loss. Um, I'm almost down. Yeah, this was our only loss. Was we 2009 was the um, and this is the year that Sam Bradford won the Heisman. Um, yeah, Texas would lose to Texas Tech with Crabtree. That was this year, 2008. That game was so much fun. It was absolutely phenomenal. And so that's what I'm saying is it's back, bro. We're back. It's so good to be back. Game day is going to be there, you know? Um it's like thank oh, it feels so good. It's because of the whole SEC thing, right? Like because of the whole Big 10 and like every other conference and the Big 12 hasn't really shown up. And with both Texas and Oklahoma being down or just a little bit above average, or one team coming in. Last year, OU came in without our starting quarterback. Dylan Gabriel was injured, and that was a revenge game. Like last year's game is what the game with Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler was 2 years ago, where Texas came out and just started destroying Oklahoma. Last year is what that game should have been. Texas should have destroyed OU for the past 2 years. I hate saying that, but it's true. And so we talked about how great this Texas team is when we look at that Kansas game. And that game ended, the Kansas Texas game ended, and that game ended around 5:30 because that was a 2:30 kick. Oklahoma was kicking off against Iowa State at 6. And for both these teams, and it's happened before, these are classic games. It was 2007 when a number 3 Oklahoma went into Boulder, Colorado, and lost on a last second field goal. Number 3, Oklahoma. And then that very same day, I don't know what their rank was, but an undefeated Texas team went up to Manhattan, Kansas, and lost. And so the next week, it was just like the biggest letdown of oh man, y'all suck. You lost to Kansas State. Oh man, y'all suck. You lost to Colorado. And we're like, well, then what does it mean if we win this game? So I didn't want that to happen this week. Um, I I wanted to make sure that Oklahoma didn't have a letdown, and I wanted to make sure Texas didn't have a letdown because it's been a long time. Texas is a 6-point favorite. That spread opened at 5.5, and I'd agree with that. I wouldn't mind if it went up to 7. I think Texas is that good, and I only say that because I think Quinn Ewers is much better than Dylan Gabriel. Um, I mean, the floor for Dylan Gabriel is so much lower than Quinn Ewers. A Dylan Gabriel bad game is so much worse than a Quinn Ewers bad game. I think a Quinn Ewers bad game is probably an average Dylan Gabriel game. And no one saw me like make that face where I'm like, ugh, but that's what my face looked like. That sound. Ugh. Late people, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Um, so offensively speaking, and then the running game. The Oklahoma running game is not good. It's left a lot to be desired. Um, and it's been one of those things where it's kind of running back by committee. Marcus Major is the starter. I say that because he hasn't done a ton to make me be like, dude, this guy is good. Like, really, really great running back. Eric Gray, who was the starter last year, who's now playing for the New York Giants. Um, I remember being like, this guy's like a really good running back, like really good. And he's one of the reasons why we're in games last year. I can't say that about the running backs we have now. Javante Barnes and Marcus Major, I just can't. Um, so that those two things were Texas. It's just like Texas has at running back what OU used to have in the early 2000s, which is just a stable of dudes. Just keep one after another. We'll put them in. We'll make holes. They'll run. They'll hit. They'll break away. Like we could put whoever we want in there, and OU does not have that, and that's going to hurt us. Um, in terms of passing, I think just the level of experience we have at receiver. If we talk about tight end Austin Stogner, we talk about Drake Stoops, who's been around. I think this is year 6, and then Farouk, who's a junior, and then Nick Anderson. Um, I think I think that's enough to make it close, but the talent level is still better at Texas. Um, so if we go offense to offense, Texas has OU beat for sure, 1,000%. Our offense has the capability, but I have not seen Oklahoma play the level of quality of defense. Let me know if that doesn't make sense because it probably doesn't. That we're about to go up against with Texas. And that's the rub is the only thing that's going to save Oklahoma is our defense. Um, so here's what we're going to get into. Texas's defense has only surrendered an average of 290 yards per game this season. That is first in the conference. Now, on the flip side, Oklahoma has allowed just an average of 10.8 points per game, the lowest in the Big 12. So the best, that's the best in the Big 12. So Texas's defense is best in the conference in yards. OU's defense is the best in the conference in points. Um, we talk about OU's offense. We Oklahoma does have a conference high 47 points per game this season, but that's a little bit of a misnomer. Um, our game against Arkansas State, where we scored, I believe it was 72 points, that's gonna bring that up a bit. Iowa State is horrible, and we scored. We hung half 100 on them, and then Tulsa, 66. The ones that should really kind of bring it down to earth a bit, we scored 20 against Cincy. I'm saying we. I am purposely saying we scored 20 against Cincinnati and 28 against SMU. And I think that's cause for concern offensively. I really do. Like, um, that's an issue. We shouldn't look at the Oklahoma performance against Arkansas State and Tulsa and be like, man, look at that offense go. Where Texas can look against Alabama and be like, this is what we can do when we want to on the road. Um, there's another part of it, may be part of the misnomer, but Oklahoma is outscoring its opponents by 18 points per game, more than would be expected of the average top 25 teams, which is best in the nation. Um, this is from K Ford. I enjoy following him, so follow him on Twitter. Um, I'm going to read that again. I don't know if it's late or if I'm illiterate, but I know this is hard to process because I don't have it on the screen or anything. Average scoring margin per game relative to what would be expected of the average top 25 football team given the schedule. I mean, how awesome is that? That's why I love it. So let me give you the names on here on the list. Number one's Oklahoma at 18. Penn State, Oregon, Washington, Ohio State, and 6 is Texas. So Georgia's not on here, right? Um, Alabama's not on here. So that's what makes it's the relative margin. So Oklahoma's doing a good job in terms of what is expected of them. Um, and so I think that's another reason why this game's going to be interesting is they're performing way better than expected. And we talked about the spread being 6. Um, and here's the other thing. The ESPN matchup predictor has Oklahoma with a 55% chance of winning. So Vegas has the odds on Texas, but the little AI thing on ESPN has the odds on Oklahoma. I think that's another reason why this matchup is so awesome. I'm so pumped. Here's the other thing. Oklahoma has a 4-3 edge when College Game Day is on hand for the Red River Shootout. Here are the scores, by the way, for when Game Day's on hand. 2021, Oklahoma 55, Texas 48. 2018, Texas 48, OU 45. Those are two close games. 2011, OU 55, Texas 17. That's the misnomer. Yeah, that's the misnomer. The rest, 2009, Texas 16, OU 13. 2008, the game we talked about at the outset, Texas 45, OU 35. 2002, OU 35, Texas 24. And then 2001, OU 14, Texas 3. This game should live up to the hype. I'm really hoping. If it doesn't, I think Texas blows us out. If things go south, I think that advantage goes to Texas. But if things go the way they look on paper, the way we talk about Oklahoma outscoring opponents more than they are expected to, when we talk about the spread, when we talk about game day showing up, um, and we talk about the ESPN matchup predictor favoring Oklahoma, we're splitting hairs, people. We are splitting hairs. This should be a great game. It's noon, ABC, noon Eastern. Um, can't wait. I cannot wait. And I hope if you have not watched that game from start to finish, and I'm going to make one plug, we'll talk about the nightcap and I'll end it because I know I've been droning on. Um, People talk about Ohio State, Michigan being the best rivalry in college football. And I think I can stomach that for now because it's had so many national title implications the past few years. And those states genuinely like hate each other, hate each other. Um, like the police presence in Michigan in Ann Arbor like has to double, or am I switching it in Columbus? Like they've got to like jack everything up. Um, so I get that. And I forget what I think they've got Auburn, Alabama, excuse me, as number two, they being like ESPN or Sports Illustrated. Best rivalry in college football. Again, SEC and Alabama, but this is three. And this year, my hope is this kind of brings it back in. But what this game has that the others don't is it's a neutral field, meaning it's not OU's home and it's not Texas's home. It's right in the middle between both campuses. Both campuses. It's actually the Cotton Bowl where it's played is closer to Norman, Oklahoma, than it is to Austin, Texas, and it's going to be a crisp, cool day for the first time since maybe April, which is insane. Let's look up Dallas weather. It's supposed to be 72 the high. At kick, it's supposed to be around 68. So for Texas, that's cool, right? I know some people in the north, whoever from the north would be listening to this, would be like, what? But that's where we're at. So you're going to be at the fair. You're going to be at a neutral site. You're going to be almost equidistant between two campuses. It's the best scene in sports at one of the oldest stadiums in college football. It's phenomenal. So I can't wait. It's going to be a day. I'm pumped that it's back. I hope those of you who listen to this kindly, my students, please check it out. It's phenomenal. The last thing I'll say is I had this thing about I'll have to save it till next week. Um, the spreads and the way that the bottom SEC teams are besides Vanderbilt are like covering the spread 60 to 80% of the time. Um, and it's not like that in any other conference. So like um they're underrating the bottom part of the conference and overrating. Anyway, we'll talk about that next week. I'll save it. The nightcap though at 6 o'clock Eastern is Kentucky. We just talked about them at Georgia. And Georgia is 0-4 against the spread. And it's like the question is, how much longer is Georgia going to sleepwalk? And both teams are undefeated. So that should be a really interesting game. And I think Kentucky's going to have some serious swagger um, coming into this game. And I think Georgia's just been sleepwalking too much. This is a trap game, even though it's at night. Um, so anyway, that is the podcast for this week. Boomer Sooner, go OU. Thank you again for listening. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you so much for those of you who listen. I know there are people who will say stuff at school, and I can't tell you how much I deeply appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Someday all this will get better, like with music and maybe like a guest or something. But right now, how poorly some of this is, Thank you for listening. All right. I'll talk to y'all next week. Go you.